We should be this week looking at the survey results, and I didn't get the survey sent out in time. And then I sent it out, I think, on Wednesday or Thursday, and 5 of you have actually checked your email and did it. So you 5, thank you. We appreciate you. The other 25, check your email. You go, I don't know if I'm one of the 25. Yeah, I just kind of randomly chose 30 people. Okay, so everybody check your email and
check your junk.
Check your junk, because it's coming from a NCD website, Natural Church Development, but I think it says NCD on it, on the email. So anyway, I was just trying to keep it well-rounded, so I pulled up our church RAM, which is our database, and just kind of randomly went through some groups, some of our different committees and some of our different grow groups. But I was just trying to keep it as random as I could and kind of get a good representation of the different areas of our church. So if you got picked, I wasn't out to get you. If you didn't get picked, I wasn't trying to leave you out. And if you just really want to do it, let me know. I'll send you an email, because I have a feeling that we're going to need more people. Because I need to have 30 take it. So hopefully, if everybody will keep watching your email over the next few days, and I really need by Wednesday or Thursday to have everybody do that, or next Sunday will be quick. Because we really need to be talking about that and getting that done. So anyway, but it's not a big deal at this point, because this doesn't build upon what we would learn through that necessarily. So anyway, we're talking about everybody's favorite topic in the world: change. Why is change so hard? It is. Now, some of us are we naturally change easier than others, but everybody struggles with change. It's because the routine keeps us alive. There's something to that. If we're always looking for change, we're trying things that we've never tried before, and eventually you try something that kills you, and that's not a good trait. And so there's that part of it. But at the same time, we have to be willing to change, or we die. And tradition is, well, the reason people like traditions is you know the rules, it makes sense, it feels good. Usually it reminds you of something that happened in the past that was something good in your life. And when you lose tradition, it can feel like you're losing your identity. And I'm kind of getting at that age, now that I'm in my 50s, that I'm starting to understand that losing the identity, and just kind of like, wait a minute, I used to be the young preacher in the room. I'm not anymore. Well, it depends on
which room you're in.
Which room I'm in. There's still, sometimes I'm going, I should not be the youngest person in this room. But anyway, so things change. And here's the picture of one of my favorite changes that's happened in history. All right? And let's see if she can pull this off, because I didn't get it embedded into the PowerPoint.
And it's a mess. Uh-oh.
It's muted.
Introduces Mustang 2. It's nice.
Aren't you glad the sound worked? That's like the greatest thing about the Mustang is the sound. Matter of fact, they even put speakers underneath the electric Mustang so that you can still hear them. Isn't that cool? Yeah, who decided to brand an electric car with a Mustang? I don't know. It was not smart. But anyway, I've had a few of those models through the years, and the last 5 years, I wouldn't live where I could have a Mustang, and here I am, not living where I can have a Mustang, because we'd be stuck all the time. So I'm gonna have to pay my drive so I can have a Mustang. But anyway, you know, things change. Things change. There's evolution. And some of those changes were good, and some of them were bad. We talked about the Mustang too. Oh my goodness. You know, and what's weird is the Fox body, the first few years, it wasn't that bad, but that last couple of years of the Fox body, it is something weird to it, man. I don't know. It got strange. But, you know, things have a tendency to change. So let's talk about how we experience change and how we go through transition. All right, so we're going to have some psychology lessons going on here tonight. Probably not biblical enough in some of this stuff, so we'll stop and pray at some point. But, you know, change has an emotional side to it. It has an emotional side to it. The change is the tangible change itself. So when I'm talking about change, I'm talking about what you're doing, the situation, the decisions, the new programs. But in the midst of change, you have a transition. And the transition is the emotional process that people go through as they experience change. And we all are going to be a little different in how we experience this transition. But look at this graph. It's on your paper. And yeah, you got behind, but that's okay.
I was counting.
Tara's trying to be the pastor's wife and Lance tonight. So
Impossible.
there's like 15 of y'all trying to be Lance tonight, I noticed. So y'all be sure to let him know that we missed him. But so here is kind of the emotions that you go through as you experience change. And this is kind of the percentage of people where you will start. Now there's some people you're just on board with change. You're ready for something new. And you're just going to jump right in and be excited about that new beginning. It's like you're there, all right? And there's another group of you that, you know, you're kind of neutral. Yeah, whatever, you know, we'll get through this, and you're just kind of neutral about change. But most people, when there's a change up front, they feel this ending, losing, and letting go. You experience the loss. And when someone else is in charge of change, this is where I'll start. If I'm in charge of change, I feel differently. But I think that's probably normal too, right? It's who's in control of that change. So my personality, I always think that it doesn't get better than where I am right now. You know, you have people that are always, the grass is always greener on the other side. I always assume that I already have the greenest grass, and if I leave this green grass, it's only going to turn brown. Okay? And so it's moving, that's probably one thing I think moving and changing cities and churches is something I've always just kind of struggled with, because I'm thinking, okay, God's calling me there, I'm going backwards. I always feel like I'm going backwards. And then I get there, I'm like, oh, this is the greatest thing that ever happened. Because at first, all I can see is what I'm having to put behind me. You know, it's the same thing in every church I've gone through, but when I was coming here, and bypassed his friends, but hey, are you excited about moving to McAllister? Well, before I got here, the answer was no. All I could think about was the people I'm saying goodbye to and the church that I love, and they like me there. Well, my new church doesn't like me. I mean, this morning, I'm going to get bit because I'm trying to make you like me. But I'm going through all those, and that's the way I think it's natural for most of us. We go through the change, and there's an emotional part of change that we have to get through. And you cannot lead change while serving people compassionately if you ignore the reality. And so as a leader, and as many of you have leadership roles within the church, as we go through times of change, we have to understand that people are going through different stages of this. People are experiencing it differently. And to be patient. It's easy to say, well, just get on board. Well, they'll probably eventually get on board. Notice that not everybody does. All right? But most people will. But just understand that they're going through loss. There's something different here. And remember last week when we looked at the growth cycle of the church and that rebirthing. Because anytime there's a rebirthing, there's a doing away with a bunch of stuff. And some of you are still experiencing loss from that. And we won't have you raise hands on different things that have changed over the last 10 years that maybe has been hard. And that's normal. And so there is that emotional side of that. And as leaders, we have to understand that, be patient with that, and lead accordingly. And so managing any transition means helping people through these three phases. And I'm just spending time on this because it takes all of us as we navigate this. First of all, it helps you understand yourself and why you're feeling certain ways as you change, but also how you can help your friends and other people in your grow groups and different people in your committees and all those things, how you can help them to get through this. First one is letting go of old ways and identities. Letting go of the old ways and identities. People always experience loss before they experience the benefits. When I became pastor at Eastern Heights in 2010. It had been 3 years removed from them moving out of the worship center that had been their original worship center, and they had remodeled their gym into their worship center. And they had transitioned out of what became known as the chapel, which we won't even get into how names can affect things and how it was never one time used as a chapel, but it affected how we thought about that room from that day forward. And we moved out of the chapel and into there, and so I come in about a year after they did what was even harder than moving into the other room. Guess what they got rid of? Do what?
Organ.
No, in the organ. Huh?
Pews.
The pews. Because they left that room and the pews were still there. So I guess that, after you'd gone into the contemporary room that was a gym with all the nice padded chairs, you could go back in there and sit down on the wooden pew and have penance before you go home or something. I don't know. But, they still had the pews. And what I learned by listening to people and talking to people and hearing this grief in them is that it was harder for them to pull the pews out of that room than it was for them to move into the other new room. There was a sense of loss. There was a sense of tradition being gone, the past, and all those things that were there. So, but then we begin to have big fellowships in that room. And we began to do some things in that room, and it became something that could be used for something other than a chapel. Because you know what you don't do in a chapel?
Party.
You don't party, you don't eat in the chapel. And so every time that there was a meal, you took the worship center and took all the chairs out and set up tables with the not good chairs around it in order to have a fellowship. And so the chapel sits over there not being used, untouchable. And the worship center, where we had all of our stuff, was that which we were up and down, chairs being moved. We were wearing out those expensive pew chairs because every week, at least once or twice, they're being stacked and unstacked for different things. It was wild. But then once we finally started using that chapel for the multi-purpose room that it became, people started to see the benefit. And they began to appreciate that room and see it as something different than the chapel. And I tried to rebrand that thing a million times while I was there. One of my failures in ministry was rebranding the chapel to something besides the chapel. I really thought the iBox Center was going to be it. He was the very first member of the church that helped start it. I thought, man, let's just name it after him. We're going to have the iBox Center. And that's how it went over. Trying to honor the past. And I should have just been cool and got a cool name. But anyway, how you experience loss. Navigating the in-between, the neutral zone. Creating tension is good for innovation. To think out of the box. Because it's in that neutral zone that you begin to have fresh thinking, begin to be creative. But what do I mean by creative tension? Sometimes that happens with just brainstorming. Throwing things out there that you could do with the space, or with the ministry, or with that would be off the wall that nobody would even like. But it makes you stop and wrestle with those things. It makes you stop. We're going to turn the worship center into the youth room. Y'all all felt different emotions, right? Those that are working with the youth are like, yeah! But it creates a tension. So in the midst of transition, sometimes that tension will help us begin to see where we could go, see where the true boundaries are. Because sometimes you just know, okay, it's like we're gonna put an open bar party room up in the worship center next week, and you go, oh no, there's this line. No, we're not doing that. Well, okay, letting the youth use it sometimes isn't that big a deal. It's easy compared to this. So that tension kind of helps you figure out where the real lines are and kind of what's important. So you kind of build on this tension that is there and try to understand that. But you want to constantly empower people to have new ideas. And not, as leaders, we can't be the ones that are always the only place new ideas are allowed to come from. And let me tell you, as pastor, I hear them all. Okay, there's people come up to me all the time, Pastor, if we just did this, this would be fun, let's do this. And, I get to filter all those things. But if I say no to everybody because it didn't come from me or our staff, what does that tell you as the church? That your ideas don't matter. That we're just going to do whatever they say because that's all that's going to get done. My last church had that tendency. If it didn't come from the staff, it was a no every time. And one of the culture things we tried to change there was, okay, we need something to come from it. Y'all, you give me some ideas, and we ended up with, you have your coffee bar. We ended up with, or coffee shop. We had a little coffee bar that we put in. It was because one of our 20-somethings said, man, it'd be great to have a nice place to be able to get coffee on a Sunday morning, and done. It's like an idea that came from them. And so we gotta be careful that nobody, not a committee, not a staff, not a pastor, not deacons or whoever is the ones that are controlling everything that we do. If it doesn't come from them, it doesn't happen. And so empowering people to make ideas and have ideas is so important. And then the third thing is you make a new beginning. And, can you see it? Can you see where we're going? Remember the people of Israel? As they came out of Egypt. I spoke with the youth about this just a couple of weeks ago when I was doing their group. What miracles did the people experience? By the time Moses showed up until the time they get to the promised land the first time. a light that guided them.
Manna.
It, manna came after the, right?
After what?
After the first time that they come to the, when they sent out the spies. Wasn't the manna after that? Was it before that?
Before that.
Before that,
Why am I thinking, okay, I think I told the youth wrong the other day, because after you said I started thinking, wait a minute, where was it? I don't know. So, yeah, preacher can't tell the kids anything, it's all right. I was the only adult in the room, so.
the oldest one.
So, but here they are, they're standing looking at the promised land for the first time, they're sending out the spies and all this stuff. What other miracles have they already experienced? The parting of the Red Sea?
Yeah, water coming from the rock.
The water from the rock? Good song. The golden snake? The miracle of the Ten Commandments?
I thought manna was before.
The doves.
After.
The doves?
Yeah, for meat, when they complained they had no meat, they got the doves.
Got some doves? Yeah, what about the plagues? Manna, yeah. What about the 10 plagues? Those are right, every one of those was a miracle. And then the miracle of the firstborn and all of that happened that actually got them out. I mean, they had experienced a lot. But what all did they complain about during those years? Everything. Because all they knew was Egypt. For a long time, all they knew was Egypt. For what, 400 years, all they knew was Egypt. And so their whole culture was Egypt.
Their automatic reaction was, let's go back to Egypt.
And everything was always, let's go back. Yeah.
We had everything.
We don't like this food, let's go back to Egypt. We're all going to die in war, let's go back to Egypt. They were slaves there. They had it horrible. They were treated horrible, but yet every time that there was a big change that they came upon, it was like, oh, we need to go back to Egypt. We're going to go back. And that's our human tendency, is it not? Our first reaction is not faith. Our first reaction is always to protection. Go back to what is comfortable. Go back to what we know. What has worked in the past. They got motivated by their stomachs way too many times. And they questioned their leadership every single time they got to a place that was hard. And I'm sure Moses going, don't you remember all these miracles? Don't you remember all these things that have happened? And guess what? No, we don't. No, let's go back. Let's go back to where we were. So, there's a book by John Cotter called Leading Change. And he gives eight-part strategy for leading change. I'm just going to quickly go through this. Here's your summary of the whole book. All right, but that book plays a big role in kind of how I like to lead through change. But the first one is increase urgency. And I'm going to camp on this one just a second. Most people are okay with change if they know that it's important. All right, there's an urgency. You have to create some urgency. Does it matter? If we make a change, does it really matter? And some of the ways that we've motivated that through the years is to play upon our young families. Our young families would like this. It's going to help them. It's going to bring in young families. You have that and that urgency of looking around and going, oh, there's not many of those, or my kids aren't wanting to come to church here. So you start having that, you build that urgency. And I'll just get into one of my secrets right now when it comes to us getting relocated out to the new property. My number one thing that I'm trying to help us understand now is the urgency. Okay? You're going to start hearing that even more and more as we go over the next few months, as we begin to think about that next step in this process. Because, hey, we got a nice facility out there. This church, it's not outside of our comfort zone to have a family life center that's not on our main campus. Does that sound familiar? For most of the history of this church, there was a family life center outside the property. We have not taken a big step to do. It's nicer. It's different. We spent a lot more money on it. But it's not outside of our comfort zone. But how many of y'all heard that we got a kind of a preliminary estimate to get the elevator fixed to last more than 1 year for $175,000? We won't talk about the roofs that we've been patching. We're not patching. Go up to the 4th floor, go to the youth snack bar thing, and look up. And tell me that roof's going to be there in 8 years.
Just don't do it.
Yeah, everybody's like, no. Everybody that's seen it is like, don't do it. You'll be afraid to walk in the building. And people are starting to hear me say this more and more because as I become a little more confident in my understanding of what it is that God's wanting us to do and needing us to do, I think 8 years is max before that building's condemned. Okay? 8 years. I could be off either direction. I don't know. I'm not a structural engineer. All I know is that when I see that there's been water leaking in some places and I hear people say that it's been doing that for 30 years, how many more years does it have in it to be able to do that? I don't know. All right? I know that there's been 24 years that we've deferred maintenance on a lot of things around here because we're not going to be here forever. And eventually that stuff catches up with you. We've been living off deferred maintenance, and you cannot get caught back up with deferred maintenance. The thing about deferred maintenance is kind of like your oil change. You don't change the oil, you don't change the oil, you don't change the oil, and you save some money. Every time your oil should have been changed, you save some money until your engine goes out. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I could have spent $1,000 and saved me, $9,000 if I'd just been changing my oil all the time. Because those deferred maintenance always cost more. All right? And so, are we really going to put $175,000 into an elevator? We're sure hoping that there's some other choices that they're going to throw our way. But also, can we live here for another 8 years without an elevator? I watched some of y'all people go up and down those stairs that week that it wasn't working. And our greeters and our security people, they're not strong enough and young enough to be carrying y'all up and down the stairs. So, there's an issue there. So, what am I saying is we've got to increase the urgency because people aren't going to sacrifice unless they see that it's an urgent reason to sacrifice. And we need people to sacrifice. We need people. The funeral yesterday, I got to kind of get to be around some of my friends when I was in high school that had come back for that. It was so cool. Get to visit with some of them. And you walk in the building after a long time, and it's interesting what people notice. Let's just put it that way. It's interesting what people notice, but they also make comments like, oh yeah, we gave some money to that 20 years ago. Well, we're spending that money. It's just about gone. They're pretty excited to know that we've spent that money, but guess what? We have a long ways to go. We put in 10,000 square feet. We probably have another 40,000 square feet that we still need to put in out there. We're leaving behind 100,000 square feet, but I don't know, 50,000 of it's stairs. So I don't know. But we got. There's some urgency here, guys. There is, and so yeah, it is part of leading change. As a leader, I am convicted that this change is worth it. Therefore, if I'm convicted that the change is worth it, I have to communicate it in a way that brings urgency to the situation. And I'm not going to make up urgency because this stuff is real. Okay, it is real. And we either got to put $10 million in here, or we're going to have to put it out there. Because I don't see us living without that building very long. That's all of our education space, or about 80% of it. All right. Create a guiding coalition. Get people to be on your side in the sense that they're a part of the journey. Guess what we've been doing here on Sunday nights? I'm building my coalition. All right. I'm trying to give us foundation. I'm trying to get people on board to this process. The weather and the sickness has killed us in this. It hurts the momentum that we had up front. Y'all see people that haven't been coming, that are kind of here at the beginning. Encourage them to come back. It's easy after you missed a few weeks. I'm kind of out. This is a good group, but this is half of what I really was hoping. Of course, I told the men early on that my expectations are insane, high expectations. But we have a guiding coalition. We got people that are you're kind of getting on. Then develop the vision and strategy. And who develops the vision and the strategy? The coalition. So we're putting together this vision and this strategy, and then communicate the vision. How many times do churches have a vision? They put it together, they spend all the weeks, and then they never talk about it ever again. I've seen that happen so many times. It's so refreshing to come here and hear Gather, Grow, Go every single time. Hearing from the, Layman's the best. He mentions it a lot. The announcements videos always. So we have that mission statement that is there. We're going to take that next step with that. So where are we actually going with it? What are our goals? But we're going to just communicate that just as well. We're going to have to keep that in front of everybody, communication and where we're going. Empowering people for broad-based action. I'm a big believer in the priesthood believers, and that means that I am empowering you. You're going to be part of this process, and you're also going to be whether or not this succeeds or fails. Generating short-term wins. So when we get to that point, there's going to be certain things that are in our strategy that we know that with a little bit of effort, we can succeed in accomplishing it. Because we need to have successes. People need to have something to celebrate. And that is coming. Consolidate the gains, which is just don't give up. Keep showing a little bit of gain. Put those together. Say, look, we're doing it. We're getting there. Keep going. It's going to be a long, hard process on certain things to get to where we will believe that God's taken us. But we're going to keep going. And then anchoring new DNA into the culture. And that is fun. Because here's what happens. You institute something new. Most people are going, I don't like it. And then after a while, you kind of get in that neutral zone. You're like, okay, we can do this. And then there's a crisis. You know what happens in a crisis? Everybody reverts back to their comfort zone. Everybody goes back to their comfort. It's like, okay, no, back. And we're back here. It is, the pastor left. Let's go back to doing it this way. Y'all, did you hear that when Rusty left? Did y'all hear some of the conversations like that? I guarantee you did. Nobody's told me anything specific, but I know that some of the changes he made, I guarantee you there are people like, well, he's gone, let's go back and do it this way. Because that is, until it becomes actually in your DNA, it's easy to revert back to what was. And so building the culture is the building up of a DNA that this is our new foundation. This is our new comfort zone. This is who we are now. And that takes time. It's not something that happens overnight. It is something that takes time to develop. And so we have to get there. And so, how long did it take the people of Israel for the promised land, being in the promised land, to be that which was their new DNA?
That generation had to die out. They didn't even get it.
The first generation had to leave.
They had to wait 40 years.
And so it meant raising up a new generation, and their DNA was, okay, we're going to trust God. We're not going to have to go through this again. And it changed some things. And then they go out, they have the battles, they win, they get the land, and everybody goes and settles their land. And what do? They go back to their old ways. Because you remember Joshua? When he's old. He's old. And people are, the tribes, they're going all the wrong directions. They're all worshiping other gods. They didn't kick everybody out of the land, so they left a lot of the foreign gods were still around, and they were going to adopt them. And besides that, their practices were a lot more fun. And let's do this. And the next thing you know, Joshua, he's old, and he brings everybody back together. And that's when, in the midst of his speech, he goes, choose for you this day who you're going to serve. But as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. Why did he have to say that? Because they all were they were just running back to all the other gods. we got to get it in our DNA. You know, and it's getting it there that that's who we are. We're not comfortable being anybody else. So that takes time. It takes time to get there, and it takes time, it takes a lot of work. D.H. Lawrence says this: the world is not afraid of a new idea. You can pigeonhole or ignore an idea. It is afraid of a new experience. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. And we're not just going to try to find some new ideas. We're finding new ways to do things. We want to make sure that we're accomplishing these new things that God is calling us to do. All right, what time is it? We have business meeting at 6, so we're going to fly through this next section. Why do we exist? And we can spend a little less time on this because we have a pretty good definition of, what was that?
It's just the end of the slideshow.
Oh, I like that there's something flashing. So, why do we exist? The reality of our sin nature means that we will always gravitate toward selfish or self-centeredness. This tendency corrupts the clarity of our understanding and the priority of our obedience to the purpose for our existence as a church. What that means is, in our sin nature, we have a tendency to want to hold on to what we like and what we want instead of surrendering to what it is that God wants. And we have to always be trying to figure out, am I holding on to this because this is a truth that should not change? Or am I holding on to this because this is something I like? And those are two different things. And so we gotta, there's certain things that are not changeable. We're only gonna worship Jesus, right? There's certain things that these are immovable. And we're gonna stand on this foundation. But we have to make sure that it's not just a selfishness that's causing us to think that it's what's important. So, we're going to skip down to the synthesize. But here's kind of an exercise you can do, kind of to do what I'm just skipping here. Think through all the things in Scripture that God has told us that we need to do, the different things, that He told us to show love, justice, to evangelize, make disciples. Think through all those, and then think through the gather, grow, and go, and think about where those things fall in the gather, grow, go. I think we'll find that everything He's asked us to do pretty well lines up with the gather, grow, and go. But kind of think through that. Make sure we're not missing anything. We're going to build a lot of our foundation on that because, as I've said before, it is invaluable. The fact that people know that and we've been standing on it. It would be a crazy thing to come in here and change that at this point. If we've been doing it for 20 years, maybe it'd be a different world. But it's there. It's a good foundation for us to build upon. And I believe it fits everything. But kind of think through that. Think through those things and make sure that we are being everything God wants us to be with the gather, grow, and go in Jesus. And whether or not there's anything that God would want us to do that's not on the list. Actually, some was left off 5, so. Somebody answer me this question. I was going to do this in groups, but just going to throw out this. What hurdles stand in the way of us accomplishing the gather, grow, and go in Jesus? Do what?
Fear?
Fear?
Division.
A good vision?
No, division.
Do what?
Division.
Oh, division. Yeah. Division, yeah.
You said apathy.
Apathy? That's good.
Distractions.
Distractions.
Wow.
Good. You're my favorite person tonight.
Station lowers.
I figured that was the answer you were looking for.
not understanding his purpose for us.
Not understanding his purpose.
Comfort.
Comfort? Yeah, that's good.
I think it's the lack of initiative.
The lack of initiative, yeah.
Finances.
Finances.
Yes. Empowerment.
Empowerment.
I think as I've grown as a Christian, when I first got saved, I went to church. It was sort of almost an entertainment.
Mhm.
And as you grow, you are invested in. I guess what I'm saying is we gotta make sure we're not doing things just to entertain.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, kind of the purpose for it all. It's, yeah, it's not entertainment. It's, if you're just coming and you're a spectator, you're missing it. What about this word, alignment? You know what I mean by alignment? It's like everything is aligned in where we're going and how we're getting there. I think as the pastor, leader of the ministries of the church, I think that's a big hurdle right now that we have. Is we're not completely aligned. Our committees and everything aren't. It's not that the committees don't know. It's just that we're not necessarily aligned in the sense that all of our momentum and all of our energy is taking us there. And part of that, I think, is because we don't really have that 5-year goal. When you're just living in the purpose statement, the mission statement of gather, grow, go, it becomes, sometimes can be just a little vague. Where when we had a little more specifics, it will help align us. But I think there's some alignment issues there that cause us to be inefficient. And so I think that's an obstacle and something I hope that we will tackle in the near future. Well, let's end with this. What is your role? And this is between you and God here. What is your role in helping our church accomplish the purpose? What is your role? Because He calls us all to be part of the body of Christ. We all have a role. We all have gifts. And we all need to find our role in our place.